Date with a Debut is a Words and Nerds and Breathe Art podcast co-production, recorded on a Wagbical country. And I pay my respects to all elders past and present, and extend that to any First Nations people tuning in. Always was, always will be, Aboriginal land. On with the show.
I was a teenager in the 80s, so I went through high school, I think from 81 to 87 or something like that. So I suppose that time of your life when you're learning about yourself and your world is really still fresh in your mind.
Hello, I'm Nick Wasiliev, former host of Tell Me What to Read, author of When Men Cry, and we're continuing this miniseries with Words and Nerds shining a light on debut novelists, their journey to publication. If you're looking for a new book to devour, if you're looking for writing inspiration, this is the place to be. This is Date with a Debut, because nothing hits you like a first impression. And in our next episode in this series, I'm joined by Philippa Kaye. She's another author local to the Central Coast area. She lectures at the University of Newcastle, and her debut novel, which I'm holding in my hand, Girl Detectives Just Want to Have Fun, is now out, published by Shoreline Publishing Group. Pip, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Nick. It's lovely to be here.
It's very nice to have you. And first of all, I just want to shout out how gorgeous this book looks.
Yes.
Book that is set in the 80s. It is filled with colour, a lot of peach, a lot of everything, lots of big, bold colours. I absolutely love it. Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you came to start your writing journey.
Well, it takes a deep breath. Well, I'm actually a mother and a teacher and a lecturer, as you said. And I was like working for 10 years before I had my babies. I had three. And I was sort of, right into the teaching career, and I'd been on leadership teams and stuff like that. And when you go off and you have your babies and you're there with your babies, it's like, okay, oh, they're beautiful, aren't they? What am I going to do with myself? You get a bit, I think you're just so massively into your career, and then you're just so baby bound and housebound and, breastfeeding and all the rest of it, sleeping and routines. And I think I sort of felt a little bit like I needed to do something to be creative. So I did some crochet and I did some drawing lessons, and then I started to just tell stories to the kids, and then I started to write them down. So I started with like little kids stories, like about princesses and frogs and stuff like that. And then I think as the kids got older, the voice got older, and I had this little story about a little boy whose mum was like he was like in year 6, and then all of a sudden she was pregnant again, and he started having like the pains that she was having, like labor pains, and which was silly. It was just a silly, crazy little book. And then as the kids, after they sort of finished that sort of stage in their life, I started to write. I thought I'd try adult. I felt like the voice was more of an adult. So that's how I started that.
I love the journey that you've taken here. And I love that it also start with storytelling for your kids. I love that that's where the journey started for you. Stop the podcast. Stop the podcast. Hello, it is Nick Wasiliev here, host of Date with a Debut, and I just wanted to reach out and say thank you to all of our incredible listeners on the Words and Nerds platform who have been listening to the podcast and sending messages of support. It has been absolutely humbling to hear from fellow authors, fellow readers, fellow writers, and fellow podcast listeners about the show, and it is a real privilege to turn you guys on to many exciting new and upcoming authors. The reason why I'm reaching out here is because one of the groups I've heard the most from is a lot of aspiring writers who have been wanting to learn more about the actual process of getting your book into publication. How do you complete a manuscript? How do you find a publisher? How do you complete the editing process? And how do you get that book printed and into stores? Of course, we cannot fully cover it in an episode of the podcast every single week, but I have another podcast that I dropped in 2021 called A Little Idea. This podcast essentially covers my entire process that I went with my debut novel, When Men Cry, from writing to publication to promotion. Over the course of this 5-part mini-series, I sit down with some of the biggest names in the Australian publishing scene to cover this entire process front to back. And the best part, this entire series is completely free and available to listen wherever you get any of your podcasts. Please enjoy this brief snippet of episode 4 from A Little Idea, where I chat with David Henley and John McDonald from Brio Books around the value of a good book design cover and the fine margins you have when it comes to selling your book.
The biggest risk is with authors is that they are so close and they're so invested that sometimes they have a quite ethereal picture of what the book cover will look like, but they can never draw it, they can never capture it themselves, and anything you present to them will be wrong because you can never catch that holy grail. So that's the big trap, is when an author has this holy grail image in mind of the book cover. And in some ways they're investing too much in a book cover. We are saying a book cover is important, but it can't do everything. It cannot tell the entire story. It cannot explain that there's a plot twist on this certain page. It cannot capture all the characters. It probably can't even capture the essence of one character.
Yeah.
It is simply there as much like getting dressed. It is putting the best clothes on the body, which is the book.
It's an advertisement. That's exactly right.
I really felt myself going into a hole there.
You got out.
To hear more, head to the links in the description or head to my website, nickwasiliev.com, and check out my podcast, A Little Idea, and start your own writing journey. All right, back to Date with a Debut. Give us your 1 minute pitch. What Girl Detectives Just Want to Have Fun about?
All right. So Girl Detectives Just Want to Have Fun is a cozy mystery with romance set in the 80s. And our protagonist, Birdie Mealing, is a musician, music teacher, music therapist, and her uncle goes missing. So she decides that she'd like to find him, and Detective Hunky Herb Lawson disagrees, of course, and wants her to stay out of it. But she and her friends Stu and Pia go on a little adventure to look for Uncle Larry.
Oh, I love it. Nailed it in 1 minute. Did it in perfect time.
1 minute. Yay.
Yes, absolutely love it. And yeah, true to form, it is absolutely fun. I ate this one up. And I think also because, crime and detective novels, they're really like, they're in the zeitgeist right now. They're very popular. On top of it, like a lot of Australian great crime writers are coming through, and their stories are getting adapted. Of course, you only have to look at Jane Harper and Force of Nature and The Dry.
I mean, this would be a funny one on
I think this would be great
on TV.
Yeah, and here's the thing: I love what you've done here. Like, you take us back to 1984. Of course, I have not lived. I was not alive during that time, but the 80s culture of the 80s permeates through our society right now, and there's music and there's color. You have the songs there, the hairstyles, the fashion. I also just love seeing Sydney in the light of that 80s that I weirdly that I just found myself doing. And funny you mentioned this. My first reaction after finishing this book, I went and I have Purple Rain on record.
Yes,
so I went back and just listened to it just to keep me back in that 80s space.
Oh, excellent!
I just loved what you nailed the 80s vibe. And again, like all the people
thank you.
I was looking at the reviews of people who had lived there during the time, and they said, you nailed it. You nailed that 80s vibe and feeling. Why there? Yep. Why there?
Well, I was a teenager in the 80s. So I went through high school, I think, from 81 to 87 or something like that. So I suppose that time of your life when you're learning about yourself and your world is really still fresh in your mind. And I chose, we were in lockdown when I was writing this. There was, there's social media rubbish and Trump carrying on like a buffhead, and there was just, so much stuff going on in the world with the COVID and everything like that. And I just thought to myself, what was a simpler time? I wanted a time when we didn't use our phones all the time, and politicians felt like real politicians, and we weren't just, having lockdowns, and we weren't all ill. And so I just thought, what was that time when things were more simple? And researching I felt like it was simple because as I said, I was a teenager. So to me, life was simple, apart from all the bitchy girly stuff. But when I researched it, of course, it wasn't as simple as I thought it was. But I just thought something light and fun and simple.
I love that. And we'll come back to that a little bit. I love that it was kind of it was like reactionary a little bit to just the
Yes.
times of 2020. I love that.
Yeah.
The character dynamics that you've got here are just great. I'm gonna just say it. Like Birdie is amazing. This amateur sleuth, music teacher, like you mentioned in the intro, 20, only 23 years old, very like still, she's confident. She's in that period of time where she's confident, but she still doesn't quite know anything at the same time. But she is brash. She is very naughty. And but also she's just got a heart of gold. Her heart is completely in the right place. And I love the contrast with Detective Herb Lawson, who at some points, we will avoid spoilers, but can be the perfect foil for her in some of those moments. I also just love Stu. Just all of them.
Stu was hilarious, wasn't he?
I love Stu. Just the all of the medical jargon and all of that stuff that you threw out here.
But you've always got one friend who's like that, don't you?
You do, and this is my thoughts again, similar to the cover of the book. These characters are loud and they are fun. How the hell did they come into your life?
Well, Birdie, of course, is, us. It's all the girls. It's my sister, my friends. We were growing up in this period, and it was a sort of a sexist time, really, for girls. But we worked with it, as Birdie does, uses her wily ways, and then we also worked against it. So that was just, was just that time of my life and all the girls. So she's just a mishmash of me and my sister and my friends and, just us girls. Herb was different because he's a boy straight away. So
yes.
And he has an Aboriginal background. And shout out to the Darkinjung people. And I was reading the book Growing Up Aboriginal in Australia, and a lot of the stories were of that time around the 80s was about growing up white. These people were sort of not turning their back on their Aboriginality, but it wasn't okay. It was something that you sort of kept quiet, and you just tried to fit into this white world because that was the expectation. And now they're all sort of looking at their lives and going, who am I? And that's Herb. So he did grow up white, and his brothers did too. His brother did too. And now he's sort of looking at his life going, who am I? I want to know more about who I really am. So, and he, with the whole police force thing too, he was in the police force in the 80s. The police force in the 80s was quite a corrupt and interesting place. So he is sort of questioning himself and his place in the world. And so that was tricky. He was tricky to write in the respect that I had to be respectful to the accurate representation of First Nations people. So I had to speak to elders and get a sensitivity read and things like that. So I spoke to Gadigal elders, and I also spoke to Darkinjung elders just to, make sure I was doing the right thing. So he's a wonderful character, and I just wanted to make sure I did him properly. Yeah.
Absolutely, you do, and I did get I did pick up on that like subtext about there is a real subtext with Herb about Indigenous people's place, particularly as well the fact that not just Indigenous people's place in general, but also Indigenous cop.
Yes, I know.
And the police and the systems of authority had really contributed, or the main driving force between the displacement of those issues in the first place from many years. So really interesting to dissect and examine as well. Again, I like that there is this contrast in the story. There is the fun nature of being in the 80s, and you've got the characters like Birdie and Stu, but there is also in true crime form, there is of course those serious elements that come out when they need to come out and contrast very nicely. How that would have been a real balancing act to craft. I imagine
Yes.
would have been quite challenging.
Well, as I said before, when you start researching that time and you start looking at policies, I mean, authors, you're an author yourself, you know that you've got to research quite heavily. And I was reading lots of policies at the time, and it was just, I don't think you can. I was unaware of a lot of the stuff because I was just, living my life back in the 80s.
Mm.
But once you start researching it, you look at these things that were going on and the government's input into everything and the people, obviously, as well. You find out that there were some sort of underlying darker, deeper themes going on during that time. So I just thought I'll thread them through because you can't ignore that.
No, no.
I find it difficult to write something with just like I'm what you would refer to as white Australian, but I grew up in southwest Sydney, so I was surrounded by multiculturalism. I was interested in Aboriginality because of the stolen generation, which I was right at the end of. So there were kids at school. There was a guy I went to school with who was an Aboriginal boy who was living with a white family, a white Christian family. That was interesting to me, and I just didn't think that you can ignore that. All those themes of racism, sexism, police corruption, fraud, that non-PC time, it all sort of had to come into it.
Yeah. But again, and we'll go back to that point you alluded to earlier, which is kind of why you started this book in the first place due to the time that we're in now. And that is that because you capture it all with the 80s. There is these serious elements here. You also, of course, there's a allusion. There's an organized crime element that comes through as well, which I will deliberately keep vague because I do not want to spoil that.
You can do whatever you want in a cozy mystery.
Yes, I know, but then you've got the fun element of what made the 80s so interesting and exciting in there, and again the idea of it being a cozy mystery. There was a lot to dissect, but there's the sexual tension, there's the romance, but the overall feeling I got was just fun. It was so much fun. Like, there was stuff to dissect, but this book was so much fun, and I found it the perfect tonic because I feel like a lot of crime books these days, even though there are amazing books out there and they're really groundbreaking and fascinating, I always find sometimes a lot of those crime books can be particularly grisly and dark and cover serious subject matter and can be a read that is there for you at a particular time when you need that. And I love those books, and I like it when I dive into those books. But sometimes I also just want a fun mystery. Like, I want a fun, I want there's a moment where you can play that for a lighter style, and there's moments where you can dive into the nitty gritty. And I think nitty gritty has been very much the way things have been for a little while. And I found that this book the perfect tonic to overly serious crime stories. Do you reckon that kind of those, not the word I like is delicious murder mysteries, like those murder mysteries that are kind of,
I like that.
They are serious, but there's also that fun element to it. Do you reckon those murder mysteries are kind of underappreciated in the crime genre?
Yes, I think so. I think the nature of that crime novel is, there's got to be a little bit of angst and a sort of a darker, deeper story, in the background. And I love reading those books too. And when we were in lockdown, everybody was reading. Apparently, there was like a resurgence of people buying books and reading. And I was reading those sorts of books, M.R. Vishkik and Candice Fox and even Jane Harper to a degree, and loving them. But I also had I think I had a little bit of angst. I think we all had like a little bit of angst and anxiety just was with us at that time. And I just went, as much as I was loving reading all these books, I also just wanted to lift a little bit from my chest, that anxiety. So, they say, write what you want to read. So I thought, well, I just want something that's a bit lighter and a bit cozier and, as you said, delicious. And I also wanted to have some romance because I wanted it to be nice and sweet and happy. And a lot of those cozy mysteries sort of stay away from romance. It's not really true cozy mystery if you've got romance. And I just went, I'm doing it anyway. Kerry Greenwood has a little bit of romance in her Phryne Fisher books. And I just went, I'm going to put it in there. I was reading romances at the time too. So I just thought, I'm just going to squash it all together and, make it fun and romantic as well as what's the mystery, whodunit.
I think there's a great place for this book just in the general crime space
Thank you.
now. I think it is so much fun. It's for that. It is for that reader who probably is in your shoes, who has enjoyed all of those amazing, fantastic crime books, but is looking for something that is just a little bit more fun. And a little bit more lighthearted and stuff. Even though, again, as we mentioned, doesn't shy away from important topics.
That's right.
I had a great time, and I really enjoyed this book.
Excellent. Thanks, Nick.
I wanted to ask you about your journey to publication, because as mentioned at the top, we went through Shoreline Publishing Group, so a smaller publishing house. What was that journey like?
It was an interesting journey because I had, as we were talking before about those crime novels, I had written one of those. And it was about a lecturer, because they say, write what you know. And she was consulting sort of on a crime that had happened up here on the Central Coast, actually. And I had pitched that to most agents and most publishing houses. And of course, some agents were interested and some publishing houses were interested, but, it just didn't get past the line and just technically was rejected everywhere. But while your book's out there, in the world, you're writing more. And I wrote another one of the same character, and then that was on a little computer. So I put it onto my thumb drive, and then the thumb drive got corrupted. So the first book wasn't being picked up, and the second book I technically lost. And I just went, when I wrote this one, of course, I sent it out there, and I was a bit of a novice, obviously, and in some respects, having gone through the publication process now, I wish I'd sort of given myself a little more time to learn more about the industry and maybe slow down my very, very strong desire to be published. And other authors tell you, once you're signed, it's a roller coaster road, and other, experts say, make sure you're okay, consider everything before jumping in. But the first person who took some interest in it, I went, okay, yes, let's go. And so I went with what they call a hybrid publisher. So it's not a traditional publisher and it's not self-publishing. It's just somewhere in between. So yeah, it was an interesting process. And for some people that might be fabulous. And there were lots of fabulous aspects of it. Being guided through the process was wonderful, but I'm not sure that I think I might seek something different for my next book, something different, a different road.
It is interesting you mentioned that. I think the one thing that I always like to say to a lot of writers or readers or aspiring authors rather is that the number one thing is once you have this book or this idea is it's not going to be for everyone. Find that niche where the book will work.
Yes.
And follow that. And for some people, what does success actually look like for you for a book?
Yeah.
And if people are thinking, I can make money from it and all that stuff, then I'm like, well, you're not coming at it the right way.
No.
But if you have if you're writing a family memoir, then going with a smaller publisher might make a bit more sense. Or if you're trying to write a commercial fiction, then it makes more sense to go with a larger publisher. What matters is that there's different options out there for you.
Yes. And I think that's the thing.
There
are so many different options. There's the traditional road, there's the self-publishing road, and self-publishing, like indie publishers, they're enormous at the moment. They're making great guns, some of those people who are publishing their own stuff. And then there's like the in-between. So I think you don't know until you're in it. And even I probably, I could have waited more years and more years until I got into the actual publishing world. But I'm glad that I did it, and I'm grateful to Shoreline for being published with them. And it's just good to be in it and amongst it, I think.
What would be your advice for a small, like in terms of using a small publishing house? Like if there's someone listening to this who goes, you know what, I actually that seems like a real legitimate option for me. It's a way for me to control my own destiny when it comes to getting published. What would be your key pieces of advice when approaching those smaller publishing houses?
I would probably say just make sure you read your contract and get somebody else to read over your contract, and just take your time, I think. Maybe don't be rushed into things.
Is also that be something, you know, if you're like a first-time author as well, I think that's just great advice as well, because it's you know, that's often so many first-time, I always ask the question of what advice would you give to first-time authors and things like that. But this is often, I think, I'm glad that I'm having this chat with you in that regard, because, you know, in this series, I haven't had the chance to talk with someone who's gone down this particular route. So it's interesting. What is next for you? Will we see Birdie again? That's my question. It's the loaded question.
I think that people would be very upset if I didn't write a second Birdie, because everybody keeps saying, I can't wait to see what Birdie is up to next. And actually, I have written it.
What?
And
You've already written it?
I've written it. And it's with a editor, like having like a little manuscript assessment at the moment. So yeah, I've already written it. It's done. I'm sort of ready for the third one, really. In the meantime, I've written a romance, and I've had another look at that, you know, crime novel that never got up. So I'm sort of looking at that again and thinking, now that I've had the experience, what could I do with this? And my husband and I are writing a novel together. Oh my God.
Oh my God.
It's hard to stop though. And the process of publication is sort of long, and you can't just sit back and go, I've written a short story that was published. I've written, you know, a short story for the school magazine that was published. I think when you're a creative person, you just create. So yeah, you just keep going. So yes, Birdie number 2 is coming up. I hope.
I am so excited. You've got so much stuff coming up. That's exciting.
My
God. I'm waiting with bated breath, and I'm really excited. I hope we see Birdie again very soon, because she is so much fun. And I hope we stay. I hope we get to return to this world again.
We will. Oh, well, I do too.
We'll finish off with some rapid fire questions. We always like to finish our podcast with some rapid fire questions, part of the day.
Yes.
So I'm going to just fling them at you, and you give me the first answer that comes to your head.
All right.
So first up, what was your favorite book that you have read in the last 12 months?
Oh God, do I have to pick one?
You can give me 2.
2? I can give you 25. No, probably if I stick with the Australian ones, I'd have to say 5 Bush Weddings and Duck à l'Orange for breakfast.
Oh yes, I love Duck. Johnny, you a Johnny convert as well? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Oh, I had a chat with Karina earlier on this podcast, and I loved this book.
I saw her at Vanessa McCausland's debut launch the other night, and I told her I was coming on, and she said, "Oh, you'll have so much fun."
That's so sweet. Nice. That's so nice to hear. Shout out Karina. We
shout out
you.
Karina.
We love you.
We love you. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite word?
I thought about this because I have had a sneaky listen to some of your podcasts. I think because I lecture in inclusion and diversity, my favorite word and my least favorite word is the same word, and it's normalization. And normalization is my favorite word because normalization should be normal. And it's my least favorite word because difference should also be normal. And so we wouldn't have a need for the word normalization. Am I getting deep?
Yes, you are.
Too deep? My other favorite phrase, here we go. Let me just turn the tables, is watch me nay nay.
Oh my God, yes. That's taken me back. That takes me back a bit.
There you go.
I love them. They're great. If you could have Birdie meet one other fictional character from the 1980s, who would you want them to meet?
Well, I'll give you a little insight into the next novel. Maybe Roger Rogerson.
No. Don't tease me.
Sally Huckstep.
That's dangerous.
Or even We could turn the tables again and just say Olivia Newton-John.
Oh, get out of here. I'm done now. Nah, you've teased me too much. Can you send me the manuscript too? I'll just not for feedback. I just want to read it now.
I'll send you the arc.
Do you have a favorite trope?
Probably Grumpy Sunshine, Enemies to Lovers, that one.
Yeah, nice. I like that one. It's good.
Which is a bit, Birdie and Herb.
Yeah, it is a bit. I could immediately tell. Yeah, we've got a trope lover here. I like that.
Yes.
Where is your favorite place to read? In bed, on the couch, or out the back in the shade on a sunny afternoon?
All of those places. And I do probably a lot of reading too in the car.
Mm-hmm.
So I read books as well as the Kindle, but on my phone. So I read in the car a lot with the book up on the steering wheel. But yes, all those places. I can't stop reading, so I read everywhere.
Lecturing. You do lecturing in your normal day-to-day. What's one thing that you've learned from lecturing that you've translated into your writing process?
Well, I think maybe humour. I think when you're lecturing, kids can be, or kids are here, listen to me, students, adults, young adults can be bored. They're just sitting there looking at you and you're going blah, blah, blah. So maybe humour. I try to make it a little bit less boring. And so I do that with the books as well. not that they're boring, but I bring a little bit of humour into them.
What's your favourite debut book that you've ever read? And we're not talking recently, we're talking ever. What was that debut book that you were like, holy crap, that blew my mind?
Yes, that would be Looking for Alibrandi.
Oh,
Marlena Marchetta.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm glad we're picking a slightly older book. Yes. Often people are picking the most recent contemporaries, and for me, it's like go straight to Kill a Mockingbird. That's my like.
Yes. Oh, amazing. Yeah, that was a great book too.
Happily out the gate with that. As you do. But no, Looking for Alibrandi, great one. God, I need to reread that. I haven't read that in a long time.
And the character of when they did the movie, one of the actors was called Kick. And that's why Kick is called Kick in the book.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Last question.
Yes.
You hop into a lift and your hero is in there. Who is it?
Oh, Julia Gillard.
Oh, that's a great one. Okay, well now I need to ask you. You've got time for one question to ask her.
Oh, okay.
What is it? What do you ask her?
What do I ask Julia?
Yeah.
How are you, Julia?
Oh, bless.
Would you like to have a coffee?
Oh, that's so nice. I like that.
Yeah.
I love that. Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, if I was in a lift with Julia Gillard, I'd just be. The amount of times I've listened to that amazing misogyny speech and watch you take down Tony, I could hook it into my veins. Hook it into my veins.
And who would you be in a lift with?
Oh, that's a great question.
Well, you're asking.
I know. No, it is. It is. I would love to get into a lift and see Neil Gaiman in there.
Yes.
Or David Attenborough.
Oh, yeah, that'd be a good one. Yeah.
Those are my two. So Neil Gaiman is the writer side of me, just because I love all the stuff he's done. But David, just for the awesome human being.
Beautiful. Yeah. And just to be in his presence, I reckon it would rub off on you. You'd be able to feel it.
Oh, absolutely. I'd love that. I could honestly chat to you all day, but I'm aware that you are incredibly busy and have people to see and places to be, and you have more of these books to pump out. So
that's right. I need to be on to tapping away at number 3.
Yes,
don't I, Nick?
You do. So I'll simply finish off by saying that Girl Detectives Just Want to Have Fun is out now. It's published by Shoreline Publishing Group, and all of our listeners, for the love of God, go and check this book out. If you like the show, drop Words and Nerds review. Let us know what you think, and who else you'd like to hear from. And I'll finish off by simply saying, thank you so much, Pip. This has been a huge amount of fun.
Thank you so much, Nick. Same. Right back at you.
Hello, it's Nick here again. This episode will be the final episode of Date with the Debut for 2023. However, I just would like to shout out and say thank you to all of the incredible authors and all of the incredible publishers who have helped get this series together. And I'm super excited to announce the Date with a Debut will be returning in 2024 with more debut authors and more incredible stories and books focusing on Australia's growing, exciting literary talent. It is such a magnificent privilege to really champion a lot of these growing authors. I'd also like to finally shout out the incredible Daddy V. Thank you so much. It's been so much fun being on the Words and Nerds platform. Go and check out as many episodes as you can of Words and Nerds, and I will see you in 2024.